Hello, and welcome to Bookish and Unbalanced, the podcast that talks about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of mental health in the queer book community. I'm Katie Trapp.
I'm Amy Spencer.
And I'm Adrian J. Smith.
From authors, editors, publishers, readers, and reviewers, we all have a state of mental health and neglect talking about it. Or worse yet, we're ashamed about it. Let's break that stigma.
So this week, on this episode, other than the fact that we are recording this in November and it's Katie's birthday, we're making her work on her birthday. She will forgive us. We are going to talk about a variety of topics. And the first one we have to talk about is just boundary setting. In its varying multitudes of boundaries. Oh, so I guess really, when's the time that you guys have had to set a boundary when it comes to like writing, reading, authoring, whatever?
I'm glad you said that because I have set boundaries in all aspects of life over the last 5 years, 6 years, and it's been a great thing.
I mean, yeah, we can talk about anything. It doesn't have to be just writing and authoring and publishing. Because I have also set a lot of boundaries. And it's really interesting to talk to my husband because he has not set a lot of boundaries yet. Like, that's just not a skill that he really learned. And because of my history with past sexual abuse, like starting very young, I started setting boundaries very young. And so when he came into a relationship with me, he's like, well, I just don't understand why you have this relationship with your father. I was like, because I set the boundaries like 20 years ago, dude. Like, this is what is acceptable. And he's now comfortable with it. He's like, why is it so easy for you? I was like, because I've been there, done that. I know what I'm doing.
You're a pro now.
Mostly. I mean, I still screwed up, but yeah. I wish I could just like transfer that skill to him. Wish I could transfer that skill to anybody.
Just send it to everybody. That would be awesome. I didn't start setting boundaries until later on in life. I guess I don't know, maybe 7 years, 8 years ago, after my grandfather died, I just really struggled and spiraled and realized that I was using everything around me and everyone around me to avoid taking on like grieving. Like I just completely put it on hold. So when I was finally sat down after like kind of like an intervention at work, my boss was like, we need to talk or you're going to be let go. Because something's got to change. You can't keep doing this. Like, you mentally cannot keep putting yourself through this. And it was, oh God, it was great. It was life-changing. She recommended a book to me called Codependent No More, and life changed after that. I started setting boundaries when I thought I couldn't. I learned what was my burden and what was others. And life has been great ever since then, but it took so long to start doing the hard boundaries. Like, it's different to say I can't work over on Friday versus cutting someone out of your life. You can work up to it.
Yeah, you do. And you have to be accepting of what you will be missing, right? And I think in some ways that's the hardest part of setting that boundary, when you actually cut somebody fully out of your life, or at least place some severe limitations on what they have access to, is just that being accepting. It might not be comfortable to begin with, but just being accepting of the fact that there will be a loss and kind of like a hole there.
Yeah, and then that enters into like a whole little mourning period of, especially around the holidays or birthdays, big events.
Yeah. It's not your birthday at all.
Hey, my birthday's got a lot better when I wasn't dreading a phone call from my mother. And as soon as I saw it on the screen, like my whole mood would change. It would impact, like my heart would start racing. I would instantly like irritation would just set in so fast. And now I don't avoid the phone. I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. I don't really remember when it switched away from phone calls for me. Gosh, I must have been, I want to say it was in college, like right after high school, because I would still get phone calls from my dad in high school. But I think in high school, I was really specific for my graduation. Like I purposely sent my graduation invitation to him 2 weeks prior to my high school graduation in the hopes that he would get it and then be unable to make plans to come, but it's still ahead of time. And he called me up. He's like, "Oh, I can come." And I was like, "Oh, it's fine. You don't have to." And he didn't end up coming, but I think that's really kind of when the shift started for me with him. And in that I got way less phone calls. Now he'll send me a text on my birthday or Christmas or whatever. And it just says like happy birthday or Merry Christmas. But it's a text that I can read in my own time. And I know what's in it. Like there's nothing extra. So, Amy, you've been quiet.
I was sitting here trying to think about whether I'm any good at setting boundaries. And I don't really know. I don't think I am. I think I think I'm better at setting boundaries now than I was but it's very specific things. Like I won't very good at, I'm not very good, that might be an exaggeration. I'm better at saying no in things like my day job. I'm better at saying, or just not, not doing the extra stuff which won't necessarily get noticed, or putting myself out there like to stretching myself too far, putting myself out there where I don't need to be, stuff like that, but like in a very specific situation. Like I don't know whether I've mastered it in other areas of my life yet. But then I don't think I've yet had any situations where I probably necessarily need to have really strong boundaries. I don't know.
You haven't had the crazy reader fans email you nonstop.
No, luckily.
You haven't had the stalkers yet.
No.
I mean, but that's another boundary to set, that actually you have set that boundary, right? Like in how much you'll share.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a boundary you have to set almost right up front when you
Right. Yeah.
author.
Yeah, definitely.
We talked about that a bit at the book club that we had the other week when we were talking about newsletters, right? How much do we put of ourselves within the newsletter? Like, yeah, I'm putting myself in the newsletter, but how much do we put in there? And that's a boundary.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think yeah, I don't know whether I'm very good at it yet, because I just haven't had I don't know whether I recognize the boundaries that I've set, probably is a better way of putting it. Like I think the ones which I probably have set are kind of very obvious and probably don't require a lot of thought. Do you know what I mean? Like you automatically have immediate things which you just know, just say this is what I'm going to do, or this is not what I'm going to do. And I think because those ones come very naturally, you don't even really consider them as boundaries. But then the situations where you have a realization that you need to change something, and those are the ones where it is harder to put in place, or harder to stick to, or to just even decide what your comfort level is, where to place the boundary.
I have a question that just pops into my head. how have you reacted or responded when a boundary has been placed on you?
I come from a family that doesn't know what boundaries are. Like, there's no, everyone's business is everyone else's business. So, automatic reaction is, oh, excuse you. But then I remember it's okay. Mental health, it's good. We need those, we need to set those boundaries. But the first one out of the gate is like, really? It's me.
I think, my initial reaction, I mean it usually like when somebody, the person I'm interacting with, like blatantly tells me that I've crossed the boundary, which actually happened quite recently. My initial reaction is always like, OMG, like I done effed up massively. And I just get this like overwhelming guilt of like, I screwed up. Like, tell me what I can do to fix it, which then puts the burden on them to tell me what to do to fix it. But I get very apologetic, and then I'll pull back, from the relationship a bit until I can kind of catch my feet again and work through some of the guilt, but then also try to make sure that I keep that boundary line in place going forward in the future, and pray to God that I have not totally screwed up that relationship to the point that like they won't be my friend or my family member anymore, But yeah, I do get I'm not like the initial person to get super defensive and like aggressive towards it. I feel this overwhelming guilt, like this cold wash of, oh, I'm trying not to say the word really hard and it's not working so hot. I mean, in every relationship you have boundaries, right? It's really fun to play with characters, particularly when you're dealing with like romances, right? Like, where are these characters' boundaries, and where are they at the beginning and where are they at the end, right? With the love interest, because they will change. And so for me, who likes to think about mental health, that's a really fun way to think about the relationship of the story of the relationship as it moves from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, right? How much more are these characters going to let each other in? And then by the time we get to the end of the book, we know intuitively that they have not let this romantic love interest in all the way, because no one ever does. But they should have more access to their love interest than anyone else. So where is that kind of hard boundary line of still not quite ready to share with you everything, but still make it believable and happily ever after?
I actually carried that over to the second book. The last two that I wrote, I had a character that was really struggling with boundaries, and she ran over her partner's boundaries constantly.
I
thought she was going to say she ran over her then. I was like, I think we've crossed a fairly big boundary then.
No, but you never know. We can't rule anything out. But she, by the end of the book, it kind of felt like maybe she had gotten it together, but going into the second one, she still hadn't, and she was doing the exact same behaviors. And that was when her wife had to be like, she put her foot down, and it completely changed like their relationship at that point, because they had to separate and learn. Like, she had to put these boundaries down. Look, we're not doing this. This is what we're doing. I've asked and you haven't worked on it. So this is how we're going to do it now.
Do you think that's part of the issue with just the concept of marriage and like romance books? So one of the things that I really struggled with when beginning to write romance was like, there's never a happily ever after. Like, it is unrealistic to think that there's a happily ever after. And so I didn't write happily ever afters into like my first romances, because I was like, this is just stupid. And then obviously I wanted to sell more books, so I started putting them in, but my that seems really like blunt of me, but it's true. And so I started to try and figure out, how can I make this a happily ever after, but still leave it ambiguous enough, because there is no happily ever after. We all come into relationships with like our crap and our baggage. And so like there's still navigating that after your marriage. Like just because you have your wedding day doesn't mean, or your engagement doesn't mean that all of that crap just vanishes. And I'm always like wanting, because I like angst, wanting more of that like tug and pull and that struggle between the characters. And I forgot where I was going with that, but like was a really fun rant. But yeah, I struggle with that. And so like boundaries comes into play in that, but also just like that relationship, like that tug and pull, figuring out who each other are. I don't know. I totally forgot where I was going with that. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to have a moment now. So I was thinking that what, I can't remember which one of you said it now, about putting Katie in your book saying that the character had not dealt with their issues and gave them an ultimatum. And like I struggle with, or the one time where I think I have really kind of like laid down strong boundaries is because my partner is in the police force, and so they've had like 20 odd years of living by a very strict set of standards in which they are the authoritarian, and they don't have, do you know what I mean? Like people wouldn't, they do, but there's consequences to arguing back. There's consequences to them saying that they're not right. Do you know what I mean? And it's very difficult to have a discussion with someone who has essentially been institutionalized into believing that they are always the right party. And I think I struggled with that in terms of just having a conversation and having a, you know, in any aspect of our lives together. And I've had to set some really strong boundaries in saying that's not how I'm prepared to discuss things. Like I'm not prepared to just like let you have your piece and then that'll be the end of the conversation and you walk away. Like I've had to really push to be able to try and have a conversation, because it's not always a conversation. It's not always two-way. And my default position is that I get very short-tempered and shout a lot. Which doesn't work well with a person who is literally trained to let aggression and conflict like roll off them. Like it just doesn't work very well. Do you know what I mean? Like then I will just get more annoyed. And they'll just stand there and be like, I'm not discussing this when you're talking like a child. And I'm like, don't talk to me like I'm a criminal. But I've had to set some really strong boundaries about what is an appropriate way to have those conversations, because otherwise nothing gets resolved.
That makes perfect sense. I wonder too, just coming from kind of maybe the other side, is confidentiality, right? Because your partner will have a lot of things happen that she can't talk to you about, right? And I'm in that same boat, right? I experience a lot of things at work that I literally can tell absolutely no one about. And holding that boundary line with your spouse when you're supposed to be able to tell them everything. And then also seeing my spouse's reaction when he's like, I just want you to tell me. And I'm like, I wish I could. Like, if I could, I would, but I can't, so I don't. And just being the way I've described it to him, and maybe you can relate to this or tell me if it's off base for you and you do something totally different. is you just need to be with me in the emotion of what I'm experiencing. So if I am really upset by something that happened or struggling with it, like you just have to sit with me in that emotion, and you have to be uncomfortable with not having the knowledge of the cause. So I feel so bad for my spouse having to deal with that. Please tell me I haven't screwed him up.
No, I think, yeah, I think it's just part of our natural response and relationship with the person we share their life with, that the things which we want to know most are the things which cause those strong emotions. And so I think it is really hard to, it's always a balancing act to be able to be like supportive and yet accept that you can't know everything. And it becomes very complex in terms of just trying to balance which is the right emotion to feel. Like, I want to be annoyed that I can't know anything, but I know that I can't know everything. And now I'm getting annoyed, but really I shouldn't be annoyed because this is their moment and they need me. But yet I'm still really annoyed by this, even though it's not even though it's not like rational to feel this way. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's always like, well, whose emotion is, it shouldn't be, but like there's always an element, I think, in any situation as to, well, whose emotion and whose reaction is most valid at the time. And I think very often we kind of approach these situations in kind of like a very much all or nothing fashion. Like, well, if I accept that your emotion is the most valid and is the one which we need to focus on, we're totally disregarding anything else. Like we tend to just like throw all our eggs in one basket and never, maybe we all don't, maybe this is just a real kind of like reflection of my relationship and my actions. But then we, you know, there's always a possibility of never going back and revisiting what the other person or the other party is feeling in that moment.
Yeah, I think you and my husband are very similar in that. This is not the first time I've had this thought, but we have some similar struggles, mainly with anxiety. And I wonder if that's a thing of anxiety. Because like for me, I'd be like, of course we'll get to it. We'll get to it whenever we get to it. Like, it doesn't need to happen right now. I don't know. I think it's a function of his anxiety for sure.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's because it's not just in those situations. It's in very like any kind of, you know, discussion or conversation we have. There's always like a fear that I'm not being understood, or I'm not being heard, or I'm being disregarded. Do you know what I mean? And it does then manifest itself into like, as with like, I think everything with like my anxiety certainly just like snowballs into something so much bigger than what the initial issue was. And so maybe it is kind of like, I don't know, maybe it is kind of like a sign, a symptom of it.
I think that's the definition of anxiety. It causes things to snowball bigger than it actually is. But yeah, I mean, it comes off like, for me, who doesn't struggle with anxiety, it comes off as very self-centered. And it took me a long time to be like, it's not self-centered. It's literally just, he needs to make sure that I'm hearing him, and he needs that validation that I'm hearing him. So even I've learned that even if I just acknowledge and say like, I hear you have an issue and you have a problem, and we will get to that in a minute. But right now I need the focus to be on me, because my emotions are so overwhelming that I literally cannot deal with yours. And if I phrase it like that, he at least acknowledges, he understands or feels that I have heard what his,
Yeah.
Even if I don't know the details of it, I understand, I know that they're there.
I mean, I will also say that my partner has got ADHD, And so there's no filter. So we just say what we're thinking. And so there's no forethought as to say, I need to just like go, I heard you and we will deal with that later, because that doesn't even come anywhere near the front of their mind.
It took me a long time to get to that point. Trust me, that was not something that I figured out in year 1. It's probably not even something I figured out in year 6. I think I figured it out in like year 7 or 8 of marriage. But yeah, like I've started doing that, and our fights end very quickly, because then it's no longer a fight. It's more about caring for the other person and just who needs the care more in that particular moment in time. But yeah, which is also a boundary to say, I literally cannot deal with you right now because I am too screwed up. Like, give me a moment, and then we will let you have your moment.
It's weird though, because you were just saying about like it being a very self-centered kind of quality, and it absolutely is to a certain degree. Like I can totally see how that would appear to an outsider, but it's also then like the total polar opposite of when I'm like having a depressive episode and I just think that I'm constantly a burden. And it's then like, and if both are happening at the same time, well, you've got no chance, absolutely no chance.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out that it's really not self-centered. It comes off as self-centered.
Yeah.
But the anxiety, particularly with my spouse, it always circles around to our relationship and our connectedness to each other. And so he feels that if like I don't hear him, which is very true, if I don't hear him, if I stop hearing him, if I stop validating him, then we are less connected. But because it's anxiety, it snowballs and it blows up bigger than it should be. And so it's just kind of this like cycle. It cycles back around and around and around. And unless we stop to acknowledge it will just continue, and he will not be able to care for me, which just kind of causes, it's a catch-22, right? It just, it does actually then blow up. And so it's not self-centered, because it does all relate back to how he relates to the world and every relationship that he has in the world. It just, from an outside point of view, initially I was like, you were so self-centered.
Yeah, no.
Stop talking about yourself. Like, give me some space to talk about myself, please. You give me so much appreciation for my spouse just talking to me. Oh, look, it's not just him. Boundaries. Do you know I have to take boundaries training every 3 to 5 years for my job?
Well, I mean, it's a job where lines can get blurred so much. So much.
It's I was just having the thought, like, should we create a boundaries course for authors? Because I need something else to do on my to-do list. Exactly.
Let's just add to it.
But no, I mean, like, what? There's so many boundaries to set, like, just like boundaries on our time. You know, the biggest complaint from my family is that I'm always on my computer, which is accurate. You know how your phone tells you like how much time, if you have an iPhone, it tells you how much time you've spent, how much screen time you've had per day, like every week, every Sunday it pops up and it's like, you spent an average of 3 hours and 41 minutes on your phone. This is like a 10% decrease from last week. Notice I said decrease because it has been upwards of 8 hours a day, depending on where I was in my life. And so like that's, I don't want to know what it would say about my computer time, screen time.
The amount of times the kids go, "Where's Mummy Amy?" And then and I just hear King go, "Have you checked the office? She's always in the office."
I mean, I bring my laptop out to like sit on the couch when they're next to me. When it's my night to put the kids down, I literally put them down with my laptop in my lap and I'm just typing away on my story and they're next to me. And like my son always goes like, "You're always on the computer, mommy." And I'm like, I understand. But like that's a boundary, is like when do I set like I don't mind taking my kids to activities now because they're old enough where I don't have to take them in. I don't have to sit inside with them. I literally take my kids, drop them off, and then I sit in the car for 45 minutes, 45 to 60 minutes, and I type away. I do Zooms, I do all the work things, and then I go and I pick them up in an hour and I'm like, okay, we're done. We can go home. You know, on one hand, I think that's a really good boundary. On the other hand, I'm sitting there going, I'm not actually watching them do any of these activities. And then my son comes home with a busted lip or a sprained ankle, and I'm like, I probably should have been there for that one.
Yeah, but I think
let's add mom guilt on top of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think the toll of having to do like the mum social activities is like another episode all of itself. You want me to what now? I have to stand with who, where, and again? No, thank you.
I have to go to the Christmas parade when it's 21 degrees outside and stand there for an hour and a half freezing my tush off because you decided and volunteered to be in the Christmas parade when it was 21 degrees outside. Not bitter at all. Still de-thawing from that. De-thawing. Thawing. I'm still thawing.
You still... Adrian J. Smith, writer, everyone. De-thawing.
Well, isn't that a thing? Like, don't you like stick things in the microwave to
defrost? You defrost and thaw. But then what was Katie's earlier as well? I can't even remember it, and it's only been like half an hour. What word did we make up at the beginning?
Was it like collided?
Combined it?
Combined it. Yes.
Yeah. Combined.
Where do you like with boundaries and readers? Like I know that you're, as an author, you're supposed to have like these boundaries with how you interact with them, and there's no set, like there's no rules like in a classroom that you can just go and look over. I see people say you don't interact with people who have left reviews. You know, if somebody leaves a review, don't. My rule of thumb is no, unless like on Instagram, if they leave a review and they tag me and it's kind, I might say thank you or something like that. But if it's like on Goodreads, I try my best not to touch anything, even though it's living rent free in my head.
I try my best not to go on Goodreads full stop, to be fair.
Well, I had this one woman accidentally leave me 1 star in a glowing review. And then my second book, she left 5 stars. And I'm willing to bet so much that it was just she accidentally hit the 1 star because it could not have been better. She said she would recommend it and all this other stuff. And I'm wanting to message this woman because I see her in the groups. And I'm like, I'm not going to. But 2 years later, I'm still thinking about it.
So if it's a regular reviewer, right, especially if it's somebody on my ARC team, somebody I'm super familiar with, I would message them and be like, did you mean to leave a 1-star review? But if it's somebody that I don't know or that I've never seen a name pop up before, then I probably wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole or a 30-foot pole or a 500 million foot pole.
Yeah.
That being said, I have obviously a bit more experience than you. And so I have regular reviewers, right? You know, like I can see their screen name pop up and I know exactly who they are that's associated with their name. And like, that's helpful, but you don't have quite that relationship with people yet, is my guess.
No, there's a few that I know will read whatever I put out and it stops there. After that, it's kind of like learning these new things, but I don't know, like I see people interact with them, like authors react to the negative reviews, and I'm just sitting there cringing, but then it's kind of like, is that, because there's no rules. there's no rules, but the unspoken rule I've always heard is don't.
Yeah, I
Don't.
don't. I typically don't. I won't even, like, if people tag me on Facebook, I will respond, and if they tag me and I'll say like thanks for reading, maybe I might. If it's a reviewer, like somebody who has their own social media and they do like reviews regularly, like Alicia reviews, we'll have her on in a few weeks, months, whatever, I don't know. We are recording podcasts with her. Like I will get on and I will respond to her kind of stuff. But if it's somebody I don't know, I might like the post and that's about it. If they tag me. If they don't tag me, I probably won't do anything. But I do see it typically. I am a lurker on social media far more than I am a poster.
I've noticed.
Yeah, I see a lot of things on social media. And then I remember like I haven't posted anything in like 3 weeks. So I should probably get on that. Or like today, I realized on one of my socials, I hadn't posted anything since November 9th, and it's currently November 28th. And I'm like, that's bad. I should probably fix that. Have I yet? No. But yeah, that's what I'm finding now with reviewers is because I have regular ARC team people, right? Is that they're emailing me feedback, which is great. Except sometimes it's not always the greatest feedback that they're emailing me, even though the reviews that they're leaving are like 5-star, love this. And so they're emailing me back like questions like I was confused by this or something. Which is fine because it means I can typically fix it before it goes to print, before it goes live, right? But particularly on my last release, I got like 4 of those emails back to back. And I was like, nobody likes this flipping book. Like, why am I putting this book out? And no one had left because I was struggling so much with Amazon and getting Amazon, and I have a whole history. Getting it through to Amazon so the pre-order could even be live. It wasn't on Goodreads. And so there were no like early reviews yet. And I was just getting all this feedback like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't good. And I was like, nobody's going to like this book. And I was like, this is awful. And so I have to find a way to kind of reset the boundaries with them. Like, it's okay to email me questions, but please also be kind because it does hurt my soul. And it really makes me question whether or not I should be publishing a book sometimes.
And then not like that makes me feel better. That at like 100 books, you're still having those moments because I'm like, okay.
I do not have 100 books. I wish.
I'll give you a couple of weeks.
Anyway, no, I do still have those moments of really doubting. It depends on the book too. This one, I think, because I was struggling so much earlier this year that it just kind of bled into the release of that book. And because I struggled with Amazon, struggling with Amazon just like sucks the energy out of me. And it just kills my mood for every single release that I struggle with Amazon for. That's all I'm going to say on that. I will start cursing if we continue that talk.
And rightfully so.
But yeah, it's that's a topic for a podcast. Setting boundaries with your abusive relationship with Amazon. But yeah, no, like setting boundaries with reviewers and readers is an interesting, it really is an interesting topic. I will share in terms of what information I'll share about myself. I'm really specific about what I'll share. Like I don't mention my kids' names in anything. I gave them designations at the beginning so you can tell them apart. So my son is Spidey and my daughter is Sister. Obviously you can tell which one came second. I don't share a lot about them. I'll share like moments that happen, which could happen with anybody, but I'm really specific about not sharing things. It's things like I have a PO box that I pay for so that people don't know my address. I have a pen name to try and keep something separate, even though I show my face. It's stuff like that. And in some ways too, one of the biggest boundaries that I've set with readers and reviewers is actually not to answer an email right away. And I say that because if they email me and it comes in and then I immediately respond to it, they expect me to immediately respond to it every single time. And so sometimes if I just let it sit in my inbox for a day or 5 days, never usually more than five to 7, that expectation is clear that I am not just at your beck and call. I have enough issues with that in my day job. So I don't know, what boundaries have you guys set with readers so far, or are thinking about setting?
I try not to, because like I try not to link my wife into anything, because I don't want there being, because just the field that she works in, and we live in Kentucky, I starting out of the gate, like I had a conversation with, like, I'm not I'm not trying to not put you out there. Like, I don't want you to feel like I'm doing this on purpose, but like on Instagram, I'll refer to her as my wife a lot. My wife, the wife. But I don't I don't tag her on Instagram. I don't even think my account follows her on Instagram. Because I know how nosy I am, and it wouldn't take me but a second to find her. So I started thinking, what if I wanted to find somebody, could I figure out?
So do you have only one account then because you write under your name, you don't have a pen name?
I do write under my name.
So do you only have one account, like one Instagram for everything and one Facebook for everything?
I only have one Facebook, but the personal stuff is private. And I don't really use it a lot for like promotional stuff. I think I did make a page, but they never get seen.
Yeah,
but I do have separate Instagrams and like 2 separate Twitters or whatever it is. I don't use those anymore, but I try to keep them separate.
It's hilarious. Speaking of not using your spouse's name, I frequently refer to my husband as spouse. There's a lot of reasons why. A huge part of it is because I'm bisexual and married to a man, and a lot of sapphic readers, particularly older sapphic readers, are not too fond of the fact that I am married to a man. However, since this year, he has started doing stuff for me on the back end, like my newsletter and following up with my ARC team or everything. And I got an email this morning. I think it was this morning. I don't know. This morning was a really long time ago. From an ARC reader that was like, this account seems fake and I don't really know what it is. Well, it was my husband's email account. And it has his name on it, and he was following up with my ARC team. But because I think he's a man and it's his name and I don't ever mention his name, they were very confused as to why this person, and I'm also sitting there going, why would anyone follow up with you on an ARC team? Like, why would you think that's spam? They're literally asking for a link to your review to mark it as like, yes, complete in our system. Anyway, it was really interesting. And I was like, that's a problem I did not anticipate. So just Rebecca's like, it's not spam. It's my PA. It's fine. Emailing you. Also, should we talk about boundaries when you work with your spouse?
Yeah, she reads everything I write, and it takes everything in me not to just poke and poke and poke to finish it. Like, finish it, because she'll wait till the weekend, and I'm like, you're scrolling on Facebook right now on a Tuesday. But I have to remind myself that that is her individual downtime
That's her
and
choice.
doing
She will read it in her own time.
It's awful, but I struggle with boundaries. So I recognize that I have to rein it in and stop. Otherwise, I would just.
I could be a little more. I think I'm too kind and generous, and I'm like, oh, he's in a crap mood today. He doesn't have to do anything. It's fine. And then like 4 weeks later, I'm like, dude, why didn't you do it? Should have been done 4 weeks ago. Also, just our work ethic is so different, having grown up in different families. And so, like me, I'm like work, 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 and he's like, no, I want downtime. He asked me one time, he's like, do you know what it means to relax? And I was like, nope. Do not understand that concept at all. But he loves to do that. And I'm like, go do it. Like, that's good. That's much healthier than what I do. But at the same time, I'm sitting there in the back of my head going, why didn't you do this? Like, you should have done this 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't handle well with downtime. There's always something going on, like always something. And I just I don't understand. But that is unhealthy. And I recognize it.
It is. Yet I have done nothing to change it.
Yeah, very much so. I don't relax at all, because I just like see the next thing that needs being done. And then if I do relax, I'm not really relaxing, because all I'm doing is thinking about the next thing that still needs to be done. And then I'll still do everything that needs to be done in a day, but I'll just like compact it all down into like a really short amount of time and just end up running around like a headless chicken.
Yeah.
Or then if I do force myself, so today I really didn't feel very well when I woke up. So when I dropped the kids off, I was like, I might just go back to bed. So I went back to bed for a couple of hours, and I was like, I really need to do X, Y, and Z. And I spent a good hour just sitting there rationalizing to myself which of these should I do, because which is more important. And really, in like, if I did none of them and just went, I don't feel like I could do any of them today, like, it wasn't going to be the end of the world. But my head wouldn't let me just go, you can do nothing today. Do nothing. That's the better thing. And yeah, I just don't do well with. I feel like it's a really weird, like, even if I'm exhausted, which is usually when I need the downtime, like my body will feel exhausted, my mind will feel exhausted, but it's like this weird kind of like buzzing energy in me that feels like it needs to do. Does that make sense? Like, it probably not. But like, I think it's the same when I'm writing. Like, if I feel like I've got time to write, but I can't write because I've just like, I don't know, got a bit of a block or nothing's really coming or whatever, I will still sit there and I will still be like that, wanting to write stuff, but nothing will actually happen. But then I feel like I need to. I feel like I have to. Do you know what I mean? It's yeah.
Yeah, there's always something to do in this business. Like, I can always find something to do. I think that's just part of running your own business, right? I could be sending an email, I could be setting up a newsletter, I could be setting up a promotion, I could be figuring out what my next book's about, I could be figuring out how I'm going to release these things or what new creative idea I'm doing, et cetera, et cetera. Always something to do. And you might be right. We might be trying to set boundaries around the wrong thing. Like, instead of trying to set boundaries around writing time, like, why don't we try to set boundaries around rest time? I like that concept. Whether or not I'll do it is a different story. But I mean, because rest is it's so important. It really is. And I think it's a more positive way to reframe that, so that maybe I might actually like it.
I think we never, I think rest and sleep is just always considered such, because it's considered, it's not necessarily, I can't remember what I saw the other day where it said that sleep isn't actually a passive action. Like, our bodies are still doing things when we're asleep. Like we have to, you know, do certain, it has to go through a certain pattern of things to actually be able to sleep. It's not passive. It's not like just like, you know, lay down and shut off. But because it feels like a passive action, I think that's why it gets, sometimes it does get like shoved to the bottom of the list, because it's considered as doing nothing, and there's everything which we need to do before it.
Like there is usefulness in doom scrolling. There is. I mean, there really is. Like it's rest, it's relaxation, it's resetting minds. You know, it's giving your brain a break. And breaks are so important. But we are at the end of our time. It was a really fun talk.
And we stayed on topic mostly.
We did. We stayed on one topic. Anyways, so this is all for the lane. Stop laughing. That's all for our latest episode of Bookish and Balance. And we would love to thank our listeners for tuning in to this random winding conversation. So be sure to hit like and subscribe to keep up to date on our latest episodes. And until next time, take care out there. And remember that we are all in this together. And I'll see you next time. And I didn't bring any paper this time to throw.
I did.
I'll find some. I have.
There you go. Yay.
I got it just for that.